Welcome back to Timo's Dinky Detailing. Today it's the all-Canadian build-off. Going to be converting a Dinky 139A U.S. Army staff car into a Canada Day car. So this toy is in fairly good condition. The paint is chipped up as you might expect from a play-worn car, but it's not really damaged much. It's in very good condition. It is in need of repaint and a bit of a spruce up. And in this case, I'm going to be turning it into a special Canada Day car. So to start with, I'm going to be putting it on my milling machine to take it apart. So I've got a wooden block I've made, and I'm using the foam that I usually have covering my workbench to tighten the car into my milling machine vise. And I start with a center drill in order to drill this thing out, and because I'm already set up, I put in this big drill. Is a really cool drill. That's as far away from the model it gets, but it's such a great drill. I don't want to use any other one. So now I'm drilling a tap drill hole for a 440 tap, and I'm going in with the tap wrench. And now I go back to the rivets again, and I've moved it over, so I'm going in to the rear rivets. And again, that big drill, it's a really high quality drill, and it's better than all my other drills. And I don't have a smaller version, so I'm using this one, and that's as far up as it goes. And I'm using a little bit of cutting oil because I know from previous toys that I've broken drills because the metal, this casting metal is very chewy, and I can grab onto that drill and it won't let go until you break the drill inside the model. So it's better to put the cutting oil on it so that it doesn't get stuck. So I didn't tap those rear ones. I'm going to tap them afterwards, but there we go. The front wheels are on their own axle, and now I'm going to go tapping. I'm going to use Cool Tool, and I got the image of Mr. Cool Tool. This one I started, and now I'm going in and finishing the tapping the hole, and go to the back. This is a machine tap. It's got a spiral point, so it pushes the swarf ahead of it, so you don't have to back it off. And I like to use these because I don't like backing it off all the time. It takes a long time. Now I'm going in with a similar tap that has the end ground off so that I can go deeper so that my screw will fit in. And these back posts are very short, so I want my screw to have enough thread to go in. I do it on the front because I'm doing it already, but the front I probably didn't need to do it. So these are the screws I'm using. They're 440 hex socket head cap screws. They're button head cap screws. And they're a nice size for these dinky toys. Most of the time now, if you want to buy these things, they're all metric, and you would use like an M4 or something, which is similar, but I have all the tooling for these. So to get these wheels off the axles on this case, I'm using a file that has one edge ground down, so I can go close up against that hub and file away at the axle without damaging the hub. This is an excellent file. I use it for everything, and it easily takes off the mushroom that comes from the factory. So the front axle is completely separate from the base, so that's much easier to remove the wheel. So now I'm going to take off the tires. These ones are in pretty good condition. I put the hub back on the axle so I get leverage. So these tires look pretty good. They're a little bit harder than ones that are in better shape, but they are coming off without any damage or any cracking. So there, it's all apart. Not a lot of parts on this model. Now got my hot water and a little caustic soda, and we're outside for this shot because this stuff makes a lot of toxic odors and I don't want to have to breathe them. So a little while, the body is completely stripped. The base still has paint on it. I find that the base is the paint stays on them very well, and it's very good because most of these bases there's no rust at all. There we go, the base came stripped and it looks beautiful because even if the paint is scratched up, those bases are perfect underneath the paint. So I like to go with the wire brush just by hand brushing. I don't like the noise of the Dremel tool, and I think this brushing gets me enough. And for the wheels, I've got this little block with small nails, and it lets me brush these things and turn them over on both sides. And I use the same block for painting. You can see it's all black from an earlier job where I painted the hubs black. Now there's a lot of coarseness on the roof and on some other parts of this casting. So I go in with my file and smooth it out. You can see there's a lot, it's very rough surface. And I guess if you put flat green paint on it and it's a staff car, then it looks okay. But I wasn't happy with it. And you can see, look at, there's ridges on the edges of the roof. There's all kinds of crap on this roof. So it really needs a lot of work. And I did as much as I could with the casting itself, but I want to do a little bit more. So I go in with the spot and glazing putty. So this is when you're repairing your car and you've put your Bondo on it and sanded it down and you want to get it a little bit finer. This is the stuff you use. So when this dries, I put the heat lamp on it, which is just a light bulb. It's the Easy Bake Oven. And it dries up, and then I do a whole lot of sanding till I get it down, and you can see how unusual the shape of the roof is. So this smooths it out. I want to make my cars shiny. This base, this is perfect condition. This is just strip the paint, quick brush, and it looks like new in the factory. It's incredible material. I don't know what, it's some kind of tin plate so it doesn't rust, and they look perfect when you strip the paint off of them. So I better put a nice coat of paint on it. So I'm going on with some white primer. Well, maybe this is gray. Yeah, it's gray. This is the Tamiya primer. For the base, I'm going with a self-priming satin black. And this is the inside of the base, so I'm going to have to let that dry and then do the outside of the base. And we put primer on the hubs as well. So now the body has been primed, and I'm going to sand it down. I find that if you want to get a shiny surface on these things, you're going to have to go in after painting and sand it in between. And I learned this from watching a video on a guy who was testing out paints with his airbrush, and he said, okay, this is how I'm testing the paint, but I'm telling you that I had to sand it in between. And I find that if I don't sand it in between, you're going to see all the roughness of the casting and how lousy the paint went on. So you have to sand it in between to make it very smooth, so then you can get a nice polished look on the paint. So I'm using my micro mesh sanding paper. It's kind of got a rubberized surface on cloth. These are made, actually, this kit is for polishing aircraft windows. So there I've sanded it, and you can see I've sanded it right down to the metal in places. So we're going to have to go on and prime that as well. Now I'm using, to paint the base, and that first piece of paper is baking paper. It's non-stick. Got it on backwards. Anyways, non-stick. Anything that if you've got something painted and it'll stick to everything. until the paint cures. So I'm using non-stick paper for everything. So here the base is the inside of the base. I'm putting the black, and I put some primer on the body. And every time I'm painting, got to paint all the parts, so we go to the hubs as well. So now this is getting, I believe that's the white paint going on there. So now there's white paint on the body, and I'm going to do some taping. I'm using, this is Tamiya curved tape. I like this tape even if I'm doing a straight line. It's kind of like white electrical tape. So it's a plastic tape. The glue is not as sticky as ordinary masking tape, so it's not much less likely to pull the finish off. And so I like to use this stuff. It's just brilliant, and it goes around corners. So you push it in with a toothpick to get it into all those spaces. And obviously I've speeded this up quite a bit. I'm covering the doors here because I want the doors to be white and I want the roof line to be white. So now I've got it all taped up. The yellow tape is Tamiya ordinary masking tape. So those are not on the actual tape edges. I just use those for holding the paper down over the large surfaces. And underneath I want the inside to be white, so I put some paper towel in there. So now back into the spray booth, and I've got my red color. So it's going to be a two-tone body on this thing. So I jumped ahead. I took a long time painting layers on this, and here at the very end stages, and it's speeded up, but I'm painting slowly and I'm trying to get a nice surface that's shiny just before it starts to run. And that's how you get a shiny surface on this paint. So it's a challenge. I'm still learning how to do the airbrushing, but I think I'm getting better at it. Here you can see at normal speed. So here goes white paint on the hubs. The hubs get a lot of painting because I have to paint them, let it dry, and then turn the hubs over and paint the other side. So here I'm taking the tape off. There you can see I'm carefully peeling the tape off where the transition is. And actually the tape works absolutely perfectly. Nothing goes underneath it, so it gives me a nice clean edge. I won't use any other masking tape anymore because this stuff is the best. You can see there's a bit where I didn't mask it very well. There's some paint there, so I'm going to go in with some sandpaper and sand that paint off of it. So I got a tub of water, back to micro mesh. And I'm using 8000, which is very fine, but it's enough that it takes off that one thin layer of paint off the top of the white paint. I don't have to go dabbing paint with a brush on top. I'd rather sand the stuff off. And I'm using 8000, which is, as Marty would say, it's like sanding with a piece of paper, but it works. It takes off the paint and leaves the white paint that's underneath, and I don't put more layers of paint on top. Now the 8000 is still a little bit coarse, and I want my model to be shiny. So after taking the paint off, I'm going to go in. There's a little bit on the back of the door or back of the window. So to make it shiny, I've got to go to 12,000. This really feels like sanding with a piece of paper. Doesn't feel like there's any grit, but when you do this, it comes out shiny. When I do windows for the cars, the plastic windows, I go all the way to the 12,000. When after you've sanded it, it looks like shiny out of the factory. Very, very fine sandpaper. So I'm doing something new on this one. This is the shiny black paint. What I want is for the grill, or for the past the grill going into the engine bay, it's going to be dark because it goes inside where the cooling air goes in. So I'm going to paint that black to give it a bit of contrast and make it look like it goes all the way in. Now I'm doing the detailing. Instead of going to the paintbrush, I've got the 1mm Molotov chrome, and I'm using the pen directly because the brush kind of it's on the end of the brush and it's difficult to keep control of it on this tiny surface. So I saw somebody else doing this. I think it was, I can't remember who, but it's much easier actually to paint this thing on directly with the point of the marker pen. It doesn't cover everything, so afterwards I had to come and fill out some of the spaces where it didn't matter so much, not the edges, but in some of the corners where the pen didn't get to. And you can see there's some red showing through. So I fixed that up off camera. But this lets me get the edges, like the edges around the headlights. And there I want to get that frame around the headlight because then I paint the headlights white. Now I've got this thing on a piece of foam. This is the foam that came with my airbrush compressor, and I cut it out so that I can raise it off the bench and makes it easier to paint. Now this is a 3D printed set of seats. This model didn't come with any seats. It didn't have windows either, and it's still not going to, but these seats were printed out for an earlier project, and my friend printed out many of them till he got it right, but I saved all the copies because it turns out Dinky toys are all pretty much the same size, and I'm able to use these on different toys. So in this case, just a little bit of modification and I'll have seats for this model. So now I've worked on the detailing a little bit, and you can see it looks better, and now I'm painting the headlights white and the frame around them will remain silver. I like doing this because I find that the headlights, they just have a little bit of charm because they look like they're on. So now I've got my water slide decals. I print these out of my inkjet printer. You can look at some of my old videos where I actually show printing it out. This is just with water. I've ordered some microsol, so my next project I'll be able to dissolve these water slide decals so that they conform more to the model. But in this case it works pretty good because the surfaces I'm going on are pretty flat. So I put the thing there and then I go over it with a cotton bud and squeeze out the excess water and make sure that the thing's lying flat. There's a little block there that's holding the model from turning over, and it's sitting on top of baking paper so that the paint doesn't stick. So I use the cotton bud to get it to conform to that little groove on the door. So here's the base, beautiful looking base, and my hubs. Now to make an axle, I'm using a pop rivet, and you have a choice. Pop rivets come with aluminum axles, and aluminum is a lot easier to work with than steel. So now to mushroom the other end, I tried doing this on the drill press with the fancy trick. Anyway, there's my specially converted vice grips. Anyway, I tried to do it on the milling machine like a drill press, and I just bent the axle. So I don't know how that's done. Anyway, I use a small hammer. So that was a little more dramatic than usual. I like to use the small hammer and tap around to make my little mushroom. There, it doesn't pull off anymore. And now the other axle. You have to, once you take off the aluminum rivet, you have to file it down so that it all fits. So there's my two hubs. And I tap my mushroom in there. They don't come off. Now I got to put my steering wheel. So I drill a little bit in there, and I use this picture hanging loop and glue that in place, and I've got a steering wheel. So here are all the parts. Time to put them back together. First, the tires got to go back on. I always have the hubs on the axles when I'm putting tires back on or taking them off. It makes it much easier to hold. And here the axle's already on the base. These tires are pretty stiff, so it's pretty difficult getting them on. But they're in good shape. So on they go. Got my new tool for taking off my cap screws. A little pin vise with a piece of Allen key in there. I see other people are using this, so I had to get one myself because it's more convenient. Those screws are all painted red, so they'll have a nice complementary color for the base. Put my seat in there. Look at that beautiful base. It's like perfect. So I look real professional with that new tool. I really like it. So let's see where we started. So this is your basic army car. There's not even stars on the hood or anything. It's just olive green. If I was a child, I'd be kind of disappointed, and I'm surprised no child ever repainted this thing to make it a little bit better looking. It does look good though, but let's see what it looks like now. So I hope you enjoyed this special Canada Day edition. of Timo's Dinky Detailing. So until next time, be seeing you.